It was a quiet evening in Cleveland, Ohio, and I had just returned home from my doctor's appointment, expecting a warm meal and familiar peace. I opened the door, and what I walked into instead changed everything I believed about my family. What I saw in that kitchen still burns in my memory. My daughter-in-law, red-faced and furious, raising her hand against my husband, and the way my son reacted after. That was the moment my heart finally broke. If you're here, listening to my story, please like this video and subscribe, because sometimes betrayal does not come from strangers. It comes from your own blood. It happened so suddenly that my mind didn't catch up until my feet were already moving. I was in the hallway when I heard her voice raised, sharp and cracking like something breaking. My husband, who had always been gentle and soft-spoken, was trying to explain something in a calm tone. I could not make out the words, but I could hear fear in his voice, and I had never heard that before, not in all our years of marriage. I moved toward the kitchen slowly at first, thinking maybe it was just a misunderstanding that had gotten too heated. Families argue. People say things they regret. I wanted to believe that. I really did. But then there was a loud crash, a plate hitting the wall, the sound of something shattering into pieces across the floor. I hurried in, my heart pounding in my throat, and there she was, my daughter-in-law, standing over my husband with her hand still raised. He had one hand on the edge of the table to steady himself, like he had just stumbled back. His cheek was bright red, swelling already. The look in his eyes was not anger. It was sadness. A deep, tired sadness, the kind a person feels when they have been trying for too long to be patient, to be kind, to keep the peace, and it still wasn't enough. There are moments in life that divide everything into before and after. That was mine. I did not shout. I did not scream. I simply walked straight to him and placed my hand on his shoulder. I could feel him shaking. He wasn't a man who shook easily. Age had taken his strength slowly, but dignity had stayed with him. Until now. I stepped between them, placing myself in front of him. I didn't think about what I was doing. A mother protects. A wife shields. A human being should know right from wrong when they see it with their own eyes. She looked at me, breathing hard, chest rising and falling like she had run a marathon. She pointed at him and said he had disrespected her, that he had spoken to her in a tone she didn't appreciate, as if that justified what I had just seen, as if that allowed her to raise her hand in my house, to strike the man who had worked every day of his life to make sure we never went hungry, who had stayed by her side when she had rough days, who had treated her with patience even when she spoke to him with impatience. I told her to leave, calmly, clearly. I told her she needed to step out of the house until she settled herself, until she remembered that we were family, until she remembered respect. I thought that was the end of it. I thought she would walk out, breathe, cool down, and we would talk later, because I still believed then, foolishly, that this was just a moment that could be fixed. But then the door opened, and my son walked in. He didn't look at the broken plate. He didn't look at his father holding his cheek. He didn't look at me standing there trying to hold the pieces of our home together. He went straight to her. He wrapped his arm around her like she was the victim. She leaned into him and began crying, loud, dramatic, trembling cries that filled the room like sirens. She said, "Your mother is trying to throw me out. She hates me. She's always been against me." And he believed her, just like that, without asking a single question, without even looking at the man who raised him. That was the moment I felt something inside me break, not loudly, but quietly, like a rope snapping after being pulled too tight for too long. I stood there between them, one hand on my husband's back to steady him, the other held up to stop my daughter-in-law from taking even one step closer. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. A calm voice can be stronger than shouting when you speak from the kind of hurt that settles deep in your bones. I told her, clear and steady, that she needed to leave the kitchen, leave the house if she couldn't control herself. My husband was breathing hard, not from anger, but from shock. In all our years together, we had disagreed, we had argued, but never, not once, had we raised a hand at one another. Our home was built on patience, on quiet conversations after long days, on the understanding that love is not always loud, but it should always be gentle. Seeing him struck like that, it felt like someone had cracked the foundation of our entire life. She crossed her arms and glared at me like I was the one who had done something wrong. She said my husband had spoken to her disrespectfully because he reminded her to lower her voice while she was on the phone. That was her reason, a tone, a reminder. Something so small it could have been solved with a single breath. Yet here we were, grown adults standing shattered around a broken plate and a broken silence. I kept my voice low as I repeated that she needed to leave the room, that she needed to gather herself, that we would talk later after everyone had calmed down. That was when the front door opened. I heard his footsteps before I saw him, my son, my boy, the child I carried, fed, raised through sickness, and guided through every hardship. The one who once cried into my shoulder when he scraped his knee, the one who used to bring me wilted flowers from the yard, proud because he thought they were beautiful. He walked in and looked straight at her. Not at his father's cheek, not at my shaking hands, not at the broken pieces scattered across the floor like evidence of something terrible, just her. She ran to him as though she were the wounded one. She sobbed, loud, heavy sobs that filled every corner of the room. She clung to him and told him I had tried to throw her out. She said his father had scolded her. She acted like she was the victim. And my son, my own flesh and blood, wrapped his arms around her and glared at me. Not even confusion, not even hesitation, just anger. I saw it in his eyes. He had already chosen a side before he even asked what happened. "Why are you upsetting her?" he said to me. Not, "Are you okay, Mom?" Not, "Dad, what happened to your face?" Not one word of concern. It was like I was a stranger in my own home. My husband tried to speak, tried to explain calmly, even as his cheek continued to swell. But my son shut him down. He told him to apologize to her. My husband, the man who had stood by him his entire life, who had helped him with every move, every bill, every broken car, every late-night phone call. My son told that man to apologize to someone who had just hit him. I felt something deep inside me turn cold. Not anger, something heavier, something that sinks, not burns. I stepped in front of my husband again, not to guard him from another slap, but because I knew in that moment that if someone didn't stand for the truth, then the truth would be buried behind tears and lies. I told my son, not loudly, not dramatically, that what he was doing was wrong, that defending cruelty makes a person blind, that marriage does not mean abandoning your parents, that love without respect is not love at all. He did not want to hear it. He told us to stop causing problems in his home. He took her hand and led her out the door, slamming it behind them. The sound echoed through the house like something final. My husband sat down, shoulders slumped, not because he was hurt physically, but because the person he loved most in this world had turned his back on him without even trying to understand. I stood there, holding the back of his chair, breathing slowly, feeling the silence settle heavy around us. I didn't cry, not then. I was past crying. I was past begging. I was past hoping that love alone was enough to make family stay family. In that moment, I understood something clearly. Sometimes the people you would give everything for will hand you nothing in return. And once you see that, once you accept it, something inside you changes. Permanently. He stood there with his keys still in his hand, like he had just walked in expecting peace and instead found a storm. But instead of asking what happened, instead of looking at his father's face, instead of seeing the swelling on his cheek, he went straight to her. He held her shoulders, wiped her tears, and told her everything would be okay. And I watched his eyes. I watched the way he didn't even look in our direction. It was like we weren't the ones who raised him. It was like we were just obstacles standing where he didn't want us anymore. I didn't speak first. I wanted to see if he would ask, if there was even one part of him left that remembered the home he grew up in, the hands that fed him, the nights we stayed awake when he had fevers, the mornings we skipped meals so he wouldn't go hungry. I wanted to see if there was any trace of the boy I once knew. But what I saw was a man who had already chosen his loyalty. His wife kept crying louder, as if volume alone could rewrite what had happened. She said my husband had disrespected her, that he had spoken down to her. She used words that sounded practiced, like she had rehearsed them for this moment. And my son believed every word without asking a single question. He didn't look around the room. He didn't see the broken plate on the floor. He didn't notice the ice pressed against my husband's cheek. He only saw the woman crying in his arms. He asked me why I was making things difficult, just like that. No hesitation, no pause, no thought. Mom, you always take things too seriously. Dad just overreacted. She didn't mean it. Every sentence felt like a door closing in my face. I told him quietly that his wife had hit his father, not by accident, not in anger that came from misunderstanding, but as a choice, as disrespect. I said it slowly, carefully, making sure there was no confusion in my words. He didn't ask how badly. He didn't ask if we were all right. He didn't ask why his wife had gotten so angry. He only said, "You should have stayed out of it, Mom." That was when I knew, not that he loved her more, but that he feared losing her more than losing us. He had built his life around the idea of keeping his marriage stable, even if it meant breaking his own family in the process. And she knew it. She stood behind him, eyes dry now, watching me like she had won something, like she had pushed me out of a place that was never meant to be hers to take. My husband tried to speak. His voice was soft, too soft for the moment. He said he did not raise his voice, that he only asked her to calm down. But my son didn't care. He waved his hand like the conversation was boring him. He said we needed to move forward, as if moving forward meant pretending nothing happened, as if forgiveness was automatic and respect was optional. He told us to apologize to her, my husband, apologize for being hit in his own kitchen. I felt something break inside me. Not anger, not yet. Something deeper, something heavy. It was the moment I realized my son didn't see us as parents anymore. He saw us as responsibilities, as burdens, as something he had outgrown. When someone stops seeing your humanity, it doesn't happen suddenly. It happens slowly, one ignored call, one rushed conversation, one dismissal at a time. This moment was just the first time we saw it clearly. My son took his wife's hand and walked toward the door. She didn't look back. He looked back once, not with guilt, not with love, but with frustration. Like we were the ones ruining his home, his peace, his marriage. He said they needed space. He shut the door behind them. The house felt quiet in a way I had never felt before. My husband sat down slowly at the table where he'd eaten breakfast every morning for 40 years. He didn't cry. He didn't shout. He just placed his hand over mine, telling me without words that he understood exactly what I was feeling. Because that was the moment we both realized something we never wanted to believe. You can raise a child with love, but you cannot make him remember it. The door had barely closed behind them when the house changed. Not the walls, not the furniture, but the feeling. It felt like the air itself had thinned. My husband sat there at the table, his hand still pressed to his cheek where the imprint of her strike lingered. The same cheek I used to hold when we were young, the same face I had watched wrinkle with years of work, patience, and love. And now, that face was marked by the hands of someone we welcomed into our home. He didn't speak, not right away. It was not silence of confusion or shock. It was the silence of a man replaying every moment that led to this one. I knew the silence. I had felt it before. The day we lost his mother, the day we buried friends, the days when life taught us that pain isn't always loud. I sat down across from him. The plate was still broken on the floor. A cup had rolled near the counter. The kettle was still warm. Life had paused in the middle of an ordinary day and turned itself inside out. I reached out and placed my hand on his. He finally looked at me. There was no anger in his eyes, just something tired, something old, something I had hoped never to see, the look of a man who felt disrespected in his own home. He whispered, "I didn't raise him like this." I nodded. "I know." That's all we said, because the truth didn't need decoration. We cleaned the kitchen together, slowly, carefully, not because the mess was large, but because we needed to do something that made sense. Picking up the pieces of a broken plate felt easier than picking up the pieces of a broken son. The house, though quiet, had memory. The walls had seen him as a child, had watched birthdays, small feet running down the hall, laughter bouncing between rooms, and now we saw that same son walk away without a second glance. By evening, word had traveled, not because we told anyone, but because silence is never really silent. Family can sense fractures like storms. His sister called. She said she heard something had happened. I told her only the truth. Your brother chose to believe his wife instead of respecting the father who raised him. She went quiet. I could hear her heart breaking through the receiver. My husband didn't eat dinner that night. He sat by the window, staring outside, as if the yard could tell him what to do, as if the stars could explain how a child can love you one year and forget you the next. I made him tea. He held the cup but never drank it, just held it, like it was the only warm thing left in the world. Later, I laid in bed, but sleep did not come. I stared at the ceiling and listened to the house breathe. Memories came one after another. The night we brought our son home from the hospital, the time he fell and scraped his knee and cried until we carried him inside, the mornings he hugged us before school. And then came the memory of today, the look in his eyes when he told me to stop causing problems. I did not cry, but something inside me cleared, like fog lifting, like realization finally arriving. Love does not blind you forever. It only delays the moment you finally see. The next morning, my husband and I dressed. We did not talk much. We sat at the table with tea and bread neither of us could eat. He finally said, "We raised him with everything we had." I nodded. Now we must respect ourselves with what we have left. It was the first step, not revenge, not anger, a shift. We understood then that the world does not always break with explosions. Sometimes it breaks quietly, in kitchens, at tables, between the breaths of people who once trusted each other. But quietly does not mean weak. Quietly does not mean surrender. What was broken could not stay broken in this house, not without response, and what came next was not loud, not dramatic. But it changed everything, because some lessons are not spoken, they are delivered. The next morning, the house felt different, not louder, not angrier, just clearer. I stood in the kitchen early before the sun had fully risen and watched the light move across the floor. My husband was still asleep, but I knew he hadn't rested. His breathing had been too shallow, the kind of sleep a person falls into when the heart is too heavy to dream. I didn't rush to make breakfast. I didn't fuss with the kettle or straighten the cushions in the living room like I usually do. I sat down at the table with a pen and a small notebook I kept tucked behind the bread box. It was where I wrote things that mattered, reminders, dates, and one list titled "What Belongs to Me," not out of greed, but out of history. I opened it slowly and read the notes I had made long before there was ever trouble. Notes about the business my husband and I built from nothing. Notes about the land we purchased with careful saving. Notes about the accounts we had opened jointly back when family still meant trust. I had written everything clearly: dates, transactions, shares, ownership. My son didn't know I kept these records. His wife didn't either. They believed kindness erased memory. They were wrong. A long time ago, when our son wanted to start his own work, he came to us. Not because we were wealthy, we were not, but because he believed in building something with family roots. We gave him money, not a gift, an investment. We signed documents, the three of us, because life is long and memory is short. My hands were the ones that signed first. Those papers still had power, not emotional power, legal power. I did not want to use them, but I had been reminded Sometimes the only way to teach is to show. I folded the notebook and stood up. My knees ached, but my steps were steady. I walked to the bedroom and saw my husband sitting at the edge of the bed. He was awake, staring at the floor like the answer to life might be hiding in the wood grain. I sat next to him, not close, just near enough, and I said, plain and clear, "We are not begging for respect in a house we built." He didn't look at me, but his jaw tightened, a sign I knew well. He was listening. That was enough. We washed up, we ate a small breakfast, bread softened with tea, and then we dressed to go out. No dramatic conversation, no emotional planning, just two older people who had finally remembered their own worth. We drove quietly, not far, just to an office we had visited many times over the years. The law office, the same place where we signed our will, the same place where we helped our son open his business, the same place where the past still lived in ink. We sat in the waiting area. The walls were lined with certificates. The air smelled like old books and coffee. My husband held my hand, not tightly, just carefully, like something precious that might break if squeezed too hard. When our name was called, we walked in. The lawyer, an older man who had known our family for decades, looked at us with the kind of patience that comes from years of listening to stories that always sound the same, love that turned into entitlement. We did not cry. We did not complain. We did not argue or accuse. I simply opened the notebook to the page that mattered and said, "I would like to revisit these agreements." He nodded, slowly, understanding more than what was spoken. He took the notebook, compared dates, checked signatures, and pulled the original documents from his files. We sat there for over an hour, reviewing everything piece by piece. What was ours? What was joint? What could be reclaimed? The law, when written clearly, does not need emotion to speak. It only needs direction. By the time we left, the paperwork had begun. Not loud, not public, just quiet steps, signatures, notices, account authorizations. No one outside that building knew what had just shifted. Not yet. But soon, my son would learn that disrespect is not free. Not in this world. When we got home, the house didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt controlled, not by anger, by choice. My husband exhaled, long and deep, the kind of breath a person lets out when holding pain for too long. We didn't celebrate. We didn't speak of victory. We simply began cooking lunch together, moving side by side the way we had for years. Because healing isn't loud, strength isn't loud, self-respect isn't loud. It is quiet, steady, certain. And we were certain now. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. I didn't need an alarm. The purpose itself woke me. My husband was already sitting in the kitchen, staring at his coffee, not drinking it. His cheek was still faintly bruised where her hand had landed. It wasn't the mark that hurt him. It was the memory. We didn't talk much. We didn't need to. After so many years together, silence had its own language. I placed my notebook on the table between us. He nodded. That was enough. I knew what had to be done. Not revenge, not anger. Correction. A correction of the line that had been crossed. Our son and his wife believed that family meant we would never walk away. They believed love meant we would tolerate anything. They believed our kindness was a weakness they could lean on forever. But kindness is not weakness. Kindness is choice. And when choice is taken for granted, it must be withdrawn. I called the lawyer first, not to argue, not to complain, just to move forward. The business account, the same account my son still used for his projects, his expenses, his comfort, legally belonged to my husband and me. He was listed only as permitted use, not owner. We requested that access be paused, just paused, not closed, because a lesson does not need cruelty. It only needs clarity. The lawyer said he would file the freeze request that afternoon. I thanked him and hung up. No shaking, no crying, just steady hands. Next was the property paperwork. The house our son lived in, with his wife, was the same house we had bought for him years ago, not as a gift, as a start. The deed still had our names at the top. His was listed under secondary. I remembered signing that day. I remembered his smile, bright and grateful. I remembered him hugging me tight and saying, "I'll always honor you for this." Promises are easy when life is easy. The truth comes later. I pulled out the folder from the cabinet under the stairs. I opened each page slowly, making sure nothing had changed. The law had not shifted. The signatures had not faded. And respect, though bruised, could still be restored. We contacted the realtor next. A woman we had known for years. Someone discreet, someone kind. I told her we would be preparing the property for sale if necessary, not because I wanted to take his home, but because I needed him to understand that a home is not brick and plaster. A home is behavior. A home is tone. A home is how you speak to the people who raised you. And if he could not offer respect within that home, he did not deserve to live under the roof it provided. My husband made tea and placed a cup in front of me. His hands still shook a little, not from fear, from resolve. "I never thought we'd have to do this," he said softly. "I know," I answered, "but sometimes love must stand up, not just stand by." We spent the rest of the day preparing quietly. No raised voices, no slamming doors, no calls to anyone else, because dignity is not loud. It is patient. It waits until the moment speaks for itself. We made a simple dinner, soup and bread. We washed the dishes slowly, side by side. And when the sun went down, we sat in the living room, not speaking, just breathing in the peace that honesty brings. That night, for the first time since the slap, my husband slept with both eyes closed. The plan was simple. We would not beg. We would not defend ourselves. We would not chase their apology. We would let the truth speak through action. If my son returned with respect, the world would remain as it was. If he returned with pride, the world would change without him. Either way, we were ready. It took 2 days for the consequences to reach him. 2 days of silence on our end. 2 days of him assuming everything was still the same. Then the first call came. He didn't call me. He called my husband. I heard the phone ring from the living room. My husband looked at the caller ID, exhaled once, and placed the phone on the table without answering. We didn't need to say anything to each other. Some lessons require waiting. That afternoon, the second call came, this time from his wife. Her voice came through the speaker, even though we didn't pick up. You could hear panic in it, not sadness, panic. Her words tumbled over themselves, fast, sharp, afraid. Something about the bank, something about the account not letting her transfer money, something about bills, something about needing it now. We said nothing. We didn't have to. By evening, there was pounding at the door. Not a knock. Pounding. My son stood on the porch, shoulders hunched, eyes wild. Not angry this time, scared. The kind of fear that strips away pride. The kind of fear that makes a person remember who gave them their first step, their first spoon of food, their first place to sleep. I opened the door slowly. I didn't rush. I didn't flinch. My husband stayed seated in his chair at the table. He didn't even turn his head. He didn't need to. My son didn't look at me first. He looked at his father, the same father he had allowed to be struck, the same father he had chosen to defend silence over. "Dad," he whispered. Just one word, but you could hear everything in it. Regret, worry, shame, confusion. He stepped inside like a child lost in a store. He sat down across from my husband. His hands shook as he tried to speak. The first sentence failed. The second came out too fast. The third finally made sense. "They froze the account," he said. My husband nodded once, calm. "Yes," he answered, without emotion. My son swallowed, his throat tight. "We needed that money," he said. I stood behind the chair and watched him, not as a mother who raised him, not as someone wounded, but as a woman who had learned something very deep. Sometimes you need to let your child fall in order for them to understand what ground means. "We know," I replied. My voice was steady, not loud. "We know what you needed. but you needed respect more than you needed money." He closed his eyes, not because he didn't understand, but because he understood perfectly. "I shouldn't have chosen her side," he whispered. "I shouldn't have walked out. I shouldn't have—" His voice broke before the word "hit" could finish forming. He looked at his father's cheek, and I finally saw it. The moment the son remembers he is a son. My husband didn't scold him, didn't cry, didn't reach out. He simply said, "You watched someone hurt your mother. Staying silent is the same as lifting your hand with them." The words fell heavy. He crumbled under them. He moved from the chair and knelt beside his father, just like he used to when he was small and needed help tying his shoelaces. "I'm sorry," he said, not loud, not dramatic, just real. My husband placed his hand on his shoulder. That was enough. Then my son turned to me. He didn't try to defend his wife. He didn't try to explain. He didn't try to make excuses. He simply said, "Mom, I was wrong." And I, who had carried him for 9 months and raised him for decades, did the hardest thing a mother can do. I didn't rush to hug him. I didn't say, "It's okay," because it wasn't okay. I let him sit in the truth. He needed that more than comfort. Finally, after a long silence, I spoke. "You are my son. That has never changed. But from now on, respect is not assumed. It is shown." He nodded. Not quickly, slowly, like a person finally understanding something that should have been obvious all along. We did not talk about punishment, or payback, or anger. We talked about how to repair. Repair takes time. Repair takes action. And repair started that night. His wife did not come with him. She did not show her face. That was her choice. And choices have consequences. But my son, he returned. Not as a child who needed our money, not as a man who hid behind pride, but as a son who remembered who raised him. And that was the beginning of healing. When my son knelt beside his father, the house felt still, like the air was holding its breath. He wasn't the loud, confident man he tried to be in front of his wife and friends. He was the same boy who once used to run down the hallway with mismatched socks, asking me to tie his shoes. The same boy who used to cry when he scraped his knee. The same boy who once believed I could fix anything just by being near. But now, he didn't need bandages. He needed forgiveness. And forgiveness is heavier than any wound. He stayed kneeling for a long time. No one rushed him. In this house, silence meant truth being processed, not ignored. He finally stood up and moved to the chair across from me at the kitchen table. Not his old seat. Not the one where he used to sit at every meal. A new one. A respectful distance. He folded his hands. That was when I knew he was finally ready to speak, because folding hands is something we do when we are humble. "Mom," he said, voice steady but quiet. "I want to explain, but I know explanations don't erase what happened." I nodded. "Go on." He took a breath, slow, heavy, the kind that lifts shoulders and drops them like surrender. "She told me you were treating her badly. She said you didn't want her here. She said you were trying to push her out." My husband and I looked at each other. There was no shock, no surprise. Sometimes the cruelty is not in what is done loudly, but in what is whispered quietly for months. "And I believed her," he continued, "because I loved her. I still care about her, but I didn't check the truth with my own eyes. I didn't listen to you. I didn't even look." He looked at his father's cheek, faintly bruised at the edge where the swelling had gone down. "And when I saw the bruise," his voice cracked, "I thought maybe you had said something to provoke her. Maybe it was just one of those moments. Maybe it wasn't what it looked like." He blinked hard. "I kept making excuses because admitting the truth meant admitting that I failed both of you." There it was, the real wound. Not the slap, not the silence, but the denial. My husband leaned back in his chair, not triumphant, not bitter, just tired. "You don't lose family because of mistakes," he said. "You lose them when you defend the mistake instead of correcting it." Our son nodded, slow. It sank in. "I want to come home," he whispered. "Not to live here. Just to be your son again, if you'll have me." I didn't go to him. I didn't hug him. I didn't cry. Those reactions are easy. Healing is not. "You may come," I said, "but you must come with respect. This house will not bend to careless voices again. If you walk through that door, you honor the people who raised you." He nodded. Tears fell, not loud, not dramatic, just steady. "And what about her?" I asked, calm, clear, necessary. "She needs time," he said, "and I need to show her what is right, not follow her into what's wrong." That answer mattered, because it meant he wasn't returning for comfort. He was returning for growth. We decided to start small. One dinner. No arguments, no rewinding the past. We cooked together, just like the old days. Slow, quiet movements in the kitchen, familiar enough to feel safe. My husband sliced vegetables. I stirred the soup. Our son set the table, carefully, like he remembered every placement. When the food was ready, we sat. No speeches, no apologies repeated to exhaustion. Just the three of us eating, breathing, existing in the same room again. Not perfectly, but honestly. After dinner, he stood to leave. Before he walked out, he looked around our home, really looked. The worn wooden floor, the old curtains, the picture frames on the wall, the chair where he had once learned to read. He wasn't just seeing a house, he was seeing his history. He hugged his father first. A quiet, strong hold. A hold that said more than words could. Then he came to me. He didn't lean in fast. He waited. For permission. For invitation. For respect. I opened my arms. He stepped into them like he was finally back where he belonged. It was not the end. It was the beginning of fixing what had broken. Some families shout to heal. We repaired ours by listening. After that night, we did not pretend everything was suddenly healed. Healing is not a switch you flip. It is a routine, like making coffee every morning or folding laundry before bed. It takes time, it takes patience, and it takes rules. So the next day, my husband and I sat together at the kitchen table and talked, slowly and honestly, about what we needed going forward. We agreed on one simple truth. Love does not work without respect, and respect, once broken, needs structure to be rebuilt. We decided our home would have new boundaries, not because we wanted to punish anyone, not because we wanted power, but because we wanted peace. From now on, visits needed to be arranged ahead of time. Voices would stay calm in disagreements. No one would enter this house if they came carrying anger or disrespect. This home had seen laughter, meals, sorrow, and years of quiet partnership. It deserved dignity, and so did we. Later that afternoon, our son called, asking if he could visit again. His voice was gentler, careful, not fearful, respectful. That mattered. When he arrived, he didn't walk right in. He stood at the door and waited. That small act alone was a step forward. It said, "I understand the harm. I want to do better." We sat in the living room together. The conversation didn't rush. He didn't defend the past, and we didn't list his mistakes. We talked about what comes next. He said he wanted to be present again, to come for dinners, to help with errands, to simply sit and talk the way families are supposed to. He said he wanted to take responsibility for the damage done. He didn't ask to erase what happened. He asked to learn from it. That, to me, was the real apology. He told us he had spoken to his wife. He said she wasn't ready to apologize yet. I listened carefully to that. It is important to understand what a person is showing you. If someone isn't ready to take responsibility, you don't drag them to it. You let them face what their choices bring. So I told him, kindly but firmly, that until she could speak to us with honesty and respect, not excuses, not tears meant to win sympathy, she could not come into this home, not forever, not as punishment, just until she understood the value of what she nearly destroyed. His shoulders dropped with relief. He understood. He agreed. In the days that followed, our son came by often. Sometimes he brought groceries. Sometimes he stayed for dinner. Sometimes he just sat with his father on the porch, not talking much, just being there. My husband and I learned something through all of this, that sometimes the hardest part of love is not giving it. It's holding it steady while someone learns how to treat it. There were quiet moments too, moments where my husband sat at the table with his hand resting over mine, no words necessary. Moments where I walked past the guest room and remembered the argument, the raised hand, the sharpness of betrayal. Healing is not forgetting. Healing is remembering without living inside the pain. We didn't gossip about what happened. We didn't share the story with neighbors. Our home did not need spectators. It needed time. And slowly, very slowly, the house felt warm again. Not as warm as before. A different warmth, a guarded warmth, a careful warmth, a warmth earned, not assumed. One evening, our son came to dinner and stayed after to help clean the dishes. He dried them one by one, placing each plate back in the cabinet where it had always belonged. When he was done, he looked up at me and said, "Thank you for not giving up on me." I didn't respond right away. I simply reached out and touched his hand, a small gesture, a quiet acceptance. Sometimes that is enough. Our family is not the same as it was before, but it is honest, and honesty is stronger than perfection. The daughter-in-law will face her own reckoning when she is ready. Whether she chooses to repair or lose what she once had, that will be her lesson to learn, not ours to force. What we have now is calm, a roof that shelters peace again, a table where hands do not strike, only rest, a home where respect stands guard at the door. Some people think family is held together by blood, but I have lived long enough to know better. Family is held together by how we treat each other when it is hardest. I sit now in the same living room where everything once broke apart. The same walls, the same chairs, the same quiet. But the quiet feels different these days. It is no longer heavy, no longer filled with fear or tension. It is just quiet, the kind of quiet a home is supposed to have when the day is ending and the night is settling in. Sometimes I look at my husband sitting across from me with his newspaper, glasses low on his nose, breathing slow and deep. I realize how close we came to losing more than peace. We came close to losing our dignity, our trust, our place in our own home. But we didn't. We held the line. I think about that moment in the kitchen, when my daughter-in-law raised her hand and struck him, and the sound of it was louder than anything I had heard in years. That sound changed everything. It woke something inside me, something strong, something older than fear. You protect the people who would protect you. You stand for the people who have stood by you. Age does not erase the need for safety. Marriage does not excuse violence. And love does not mean letting someone hurt you simply because they share your last name. When my son defended her, and not us, I thought I had lost him forever. Parents do not expect gratitude, but we do quietly hope for loyalty. And when loyalty breaks, it takes the heart with it. I think many mothers know that feeling. The way your chest aches, not because of the words said, but because of the silence afterward. The kind where you sit at the table and try to understand where the child you raised has gone and who this new person is that stands in their place. But I learned something important. Sometimes children do not see clearly until life makes them stop and look. And sometimes the strongest thing you can do is step back. Not chase, not beg, not explain. Step back and let the consequences speak where your voice no longer reaches. My son came back. Not because I shouted, not because I demanded, but because I stayed steady. Because I did not return harm with harm. I let the truth sit in front of him until he could no longer avoid it. He came back because the world outside did not comfort him the way his mother and father once had. And he remembered who had fed him, held him, raised him, taught him how to be kind, and who he had hurt when he let someone else's voice replace his own. I forgave him, not because what happened was small, it was not, but because forgiveness is not erasing pain. It is choosing to move forward without carrying it like a stone in your chest. And I forgave for myself too. I did not want to grow old with bitterness. Bitterness steals years just as much as illness does. As for my daughter-in-law, her path is her own now. If she learns, she may return. If she does not, then life will meet her where she stands. I do not hunger for revenge. I hunger for peace. And peace, once you earn it, is something you do not let anyone take away again. So I sit here, in this quiet living room, with the lamp warm beside me, and I feel steady, not triumphant, not victorious, just steady. I learned that love is not blind, it must have eyes, and respect is not automatic, it must be kept. Now, to you watching this, maybe you have seen disrespect in your own home. Maybe someone you raised has spoken to you in a voice you never expected to hear. Maybe your heart has been bruised in places no one else can see. If that is true, I want you to hear me clearly. You do not have to scream to be strong. You do not have to fight to be right. You do not have to stay silent to keep peace. Sometimes, the strongest thing you can do is stand still and let others feel the weight of their choices. Tell me, if someone you loved defended cruelty in front of you, would you hold on tighter? Or step back and let them learn who you really are?